James Watt was a Scottish inventor and mechanical engineer, renowned for his improvements in steam engine technology. James Watt was born in 1736. Watt initially worked as a maker of mathematical instruments, but soon became interested in steam engines. The first working steam engine had been patented in 1698, and by the time of Watt's birth, Newcomen engines were pumping water from mines all over the country. In around 1764, Watt was given a model Newcomen engine to repair. He realized that it was hopelessly inefficient and began to work to improve the design. He designed a separate condensing chamber for the steam engine that prevented enormous losses of steam. His first patent in 1769 covered this device and other improvements on Newcomen's engine. Steam engines were the first engine type to see widespread use. They were first invented by Thomas Newcomen in 1705, and James Watt made big improvements to steam engines in 1769. Steam engines powered all early locomotives, steamboats, and factories, and therefore acted as the foundation of the Industrial Revolution. Henry Bessemer, born in 1813, was the inventor and engineer who developed the first process for manufacturing steel inexpensively, leading to the development of the Bessemer converter. He was knighted in 1879. The Bessemer process was the first inexpensive industrial process for the mass production of steel from molten pig iron prior to the open hearth furnace. The key principle is removal of impurities from the iron by oxidation, with air being blown through the molten iron.
In 1800, Britain was producing 3,000 tons of steel a year, but very soon demand was outstripping supply. Everybody wanted steel for their engineering, the expanding railways, the shipbuilding, the larger tugs. The problem was eventually solved in 1856, when Henry Bessemer invented a process for producing mass-produced steel. This giant machine is a Bessemer converter. It can convert 25 tons of molten iron to steel in 20 minutes. In 1855, Bessemer experimented with a vertical converter, but in 1860 he patented this, the fast-acting tilting converter.
This was the breakthrough Sheffield had been waiting for. The Bessemer process could convert high phosphorus local iron ore into steel. No more need for Swedish iron. Sheffield was poised to become king of steel. The bowl is tilted down and low-grade molten pig iron is poured in through the mouth, then swung back to vertical, and a blast of air is blown through the base of the converter, through the liquid metal. The low-grade iron is high in carbon, and the hot air burns off the excess carbon. A spectacular 10-metre flame and fountain of gases shoot out of the mouth. When the iron is purified, the bowl is tilted down again and the newly made steel teamed or poured out into ladles and cast into ingot moulds.
Bessemer steel was an engineer's dream, a material for everyday use stronger than iron. And within 20 years, Sheffield alone was producing 10,000 tonnes of Bessemer steel a week. That was a quarter of the UK output. It was used for machinery, for railways, for household goods, everything.
Samuel Morse was an American painter and inventor who was best remembered today for his invention of a single-wire telegraph system and the co-inventor of the Morse code, method of transmitting textual information as a series of on and off tones. His discovery soon changed the way messages are sent and received the world over. Even today, Morse code is still in use in various areas of radio communications. A telegraph is a device for transmitting and receiving messages over long distances. The telegraph requires that the method used for encoding the message be known to both the sender and the receiver. Morse code refers to an alphabet or code in which letters are represented by combinations of long and short signals of light or sound.
The age of instant communication was born on January 11, 1838 in Morristown. It was on that date that Samuel Morse and Alfred Vail first demonstrated the electric telegraph at Vail's Speedwell Iron Works. The telegraph was nothing short of a revolution, enabling messages to be sent much faster than previous means, which relied on messengers riding on horseback. Rapid communication served as the foundation for the nation's economic expansion in the 19th century. New Jersey was at the center of the new telecommunications network, linking the major cities along the East Coast. The electric telegraph went on to play a key role in developing New Jersey's reputation for innovation. Thomas Edison's universal stock ticker and his quadruplex telegraph, enabling 4 messages to be sent on a single wire, incorporated the new technology. Edison's successes with these inventions provided him the means to build his renowned Menlo Park research facility, and it all started with the dots and dashes of the electric telegraph.
Louis Pasteur was a French chemist and microbiologist renowned for his discoveries of the principles of vaccination, fermentation, and pasteurization. He is remembered for his remarkable breakthroughs in the causes and preventions of diseases, and his discoveries have saved countless lives ever since. His medical discoveries provided direct support for the germ theory of disease and its application in clinical medicine. He is best known to the general public for his invention of the technique of treating milk and wine to stop bacterial contamination, a process now called pasteurization.
Pasteurization means that the milk has been heated up to a temperature high enough to destroy any germs that could make you sick. The heat also destroys enzymes that make milk spoil, so pasteurized milk stays drinkable for a longer time. The process is named for the French scientist Louis Pasteur. During the 1860s, he figured out that wine and beer could be kept from spoiling if they were heated to about 57 degrees Celsius for a few minutes. Eventually, people figured out that the same process could be applied to other foods and drinks, especially dairy, to make them safer to eat and drink. Well, if you milk a healthy cow, the milk will usually be safe to drink. But dairy farms at the start of the 20th century were often dirty, filled with sick cows and sick people. Bacteria often ended up in the milk, making dairy products unsafe to consume. Pasteurization made milk safer, and the United States Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, began to pass laws to require it.
Henry Ford was an American industrialist, the founder of the Ford Motor Company, and the sponsor of the development of the assembly line technique of mass production. Although Ford did not invent the automobile or the assembly line, he developed and manufactured the first automobile that many middle-class Americans can afford. In doing so, Ford converted the automobile from an expensive curiosity into a practical conveyance that would profoundly impact the landscape of the 20th century. His introduction of the Model T automobile revolutionized transportation and American industry.
In those days, each car was built from the frame up on stationary wooden horses. There was a different crew for each car, and the same crew stayed on the car until it was finished. That meant duplication of effort and a lot of time wasted. So they tried moving the men from car to car. Each man had a special job to do, and as soon as he finished it, he moved on to the next car and did the same thing there. That was better, but it still took 12.5 hours to assemble each Model T. Henry Ford watched it for a while, then he had an inspiration. Instead of moving the men past the cars, why not move the cars past the men? So on one hot August morning, they tried it that way. A husky young fellow put a rope over his shoulder, and Henry Ford called, "Let's go." And at that very moment, as the workmen began to fasten the parts onto the slowly moving car, the assembly line was born. A technique that was to revolutionize mass production all over the world. Once they found that the idea would work, they began to improve it, refine it. They rolled a chassis down a single line of track, pushing it from crew to crew. And the more expert they became at this new method, the faster the cars came off the assembly line, and the price of the Model T began to drop.
Eli Whitney was an American inventor best known for inventing the cotton gin. This was one of the key inventions of the Industrial Revolution and shaped the economy of the antebellum South. Whitney's invention made short upland cotton into a profitable crop, which strengthened the economic foundation of slavery in the United States. Eli Whitney has also been credited with inventing the idea of interchangeable parts, which he championed for years as a maker of muskets. However, the idea predated Whitney, and Whitney's role in it was one of promotion and popularizing, not invention.
This is the story of an invention that changed the world. Imagine a machine that could cut 10 hours of work down to 1. A machine so efficient that it would free up people to do other things, kind of like the personal computer. But the machine I'm going to tell you about did none of this. In fact, it accomplished just the opposite. In the late 1700s, just as America was getting on its feet as a republic under the new U.S. Constitution, slavery was a tragic American fact of life. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson both became president while owning slaves. Knowing that this peculiar institution contradicted the ideals and principles for which they fought a revolution. But both men believed that slavery was going to die out as the 19th century dawned. They were, of course, tragically mistaken. The reason was an invention, a machine they probably told you about in elementary school, Mr. Eli Whitney's cotton gin. A Yale graduate, 28-year-old Whitney had come to South Carolina to work as a tutor in 1793. Supposedly, he was told by some local planters about the difficulty of cleaning cotton. Separating the seeds from the cotton lint was tedious and time-consuming. Working by hand, a slave could clean about a pound of cotton a day. But the Industrial Revolution was underway, and the demand was increasing. Large mills in Great Britain and New England were hungry for cotton to mass-produce cloth. As the story was told, Whitney had a eureka moment and invented the gin, short for engine. The truth is that the cotton gin already existed for centuries in small but inefficient forms. In 1794, Whitney simply improved upon the existing gins and then patented his invention, a small machine that employed a set of combs that could separate seeds from lint mechanically as a crank was turned. With it, a single worker could eventually clean from 300 to 1,000 pounds of cotton a day. In 1790, about 3,000 bales of cotton were produced in America each year. A bale was equal to about 500 pounds. By 1801, with the spread of the cotton gin, cotton production grew to 100,000 bales a year. After the disruptions of the War of 1812, production reached 400,000 bales a year. As America was expanding through the land acquired in the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, yearly production exploded to 4 million bales. Cotton was king. It exceeded the value of all other American products combined, about 3/5 of America's economic output. But instead of reducing the need for labor, the cotton gin propelled it, as more slaves were needed to plant and harvest king cotton. The cotton gin and the demand of Northern and English factories recharted the course of American slavery. In 1790, America's first official census counted nearly 700,000 slaves. By 1810, 2 years after the slave trade was banned in America, the number had shot up to more than 1 million. During the next 50 years, that number exploded to nearly 4 million slaves in 1860, the eve of the Civil War.